Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend just a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Daniel Smith, the genealogy librarian, and you are listening to the Local Genealogists Speak podcast series. In this episode, we are hearing from a local genealogist about their experiences doing family history research. We are also listening for their tips and suggestions for doing genealogy. As a librarian, I am convinced that we all learn from each other, and we all have valuable information to share. By the way, this episode will be a part of a larger series of interviews with local genealogists, so be on the lookout for others. Today, I am joined by Phil, a local genealogist who has graciously agreed to answer questions about social history, genealogy books, and more. In honor of the 250th anniversary of the United States, Phil will also share a favorite part of American history. Thank you for joining us today, Phil. As we begin, I would love to ask you, why did you start researching your family history?
It all started actually in 1985. I was living at home. I had just graduated from college. I had not found a job. So I moved back in with the folks. That was always a lot of fun. But anyway, so I'm living at home, and my mother comes home from a presentation. She belonged to an organization called Women's Club. And the speaker they had talked about this thing called genealogy. And her handout was really nothing more than a copy of a newspaper article about her doing genealogy. And the one thing I came away from with that article was the fact that she said it's not difficult to get into a genealogy. You know, you can do it a variety of different ways. You can interview relatives. You can, go through old papers that the family might have had around. Or, she says, take a look at the family Bible. So that's what I did. I looked at my dad had a family Bible for the Smiths. So I looked at that, and there were numerous individuals I hadn't really thought about. I mean, I might have known about them, but, great uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents. But there were dates and, various vital statistics on them. And so I just decided, hey, this looks interesting. And just took off from there.
I like how kind of random that was for you. Like, it's something that, your mother attended, but then it ended up influencing you, and, the rest is history, as they say. And speaking of history, it sounds like you're you yourself are a student of history. You really enjoy history. So I'd love to hear more about how social histories help solve a genealogy mystery for you or help you understand an ancestor better.
Actually, the social history aspect has been probably the most, let's call it, confounding, if you will, aspect of the family genealogy, just simply because, there's so many unknowns. All of my ancestors came to either Lake County or Cook County. And I don't know why, to a certain extent. Now, some of this stuff I'm starting to figure out because, like I talked about that one family line, the Smiths, they came to Lake County. I didn't know why originally, but now I'm starting to learn that there were all kinds of relatives to them at that time that I weren't aware about. So, my research is now going from focused on one individual or, couple to, all these other people that may enter into the mix too. I know they were relatives back in Germany, but now I'm trying to figure out, was that the draw that brought, my ancestors here or not? So.
Yeah, it's always a good question. I know we always talk about in genealogy the whole chain migration thing. A lot of times you'll find if, like you said, a cousin comes or a smaller family, and then they send word back and say, this place is great, come join me. So doing that sort of research is always really helpful, and I would love to hear how visiting sort of physical libraries or archives has been helpful for your research.
Well, first off, you're not going to find everything online, although I think it's increasingly going that way. But I think there's any number of documents that you just won't find online. Or, in fact, you may have problems finding them now versus years ago. Prime example is I have my great-uncle. He belonged to the Locomotives Engineering Union. So I contacted them, and they provided all kinds of information on him when he joined the union, when he terminated his membership, which in his case was when he died. But then they had information on his payout and who received it and stuff like that. My understanding is those records all have been thrown out. You can write to the union now, but the information is no longer available. Now, an alternative source is to contact the Chicago Northwestern. It's a historical library, I guess, out in Union. But of course, none of that stuff is online either. I don't believe so. I mean, so there's all kinds of information out there. It's just you got to find out what it is, and that's that's the reason for going to, in some cases, a library or some kind of archive.
Yeah, I love that. I ran across a statistic recently. I'm not going to make it up here. The popular narratives is everything's coming online, or you can just research your family history online. And there is a lot of stuff out there. But the truth is, like you said, there's still so much that's not. And the statistic I encountered was something like, it's a large percentage. It's almost like 75-25 or something. 25% online, 75% offline. So you've got to go and visit. So I appreciate the reminder of going to visit. And I also love how you talk about, sometimes if it's not in one place, it might be somewhere else. So as a genealogist, thinking creatively about where I might be able to find the information.
Yeah.
So, as we talk about online, there are lots of tools are coming online, and new things are being developed all the time, artificial intelligence, things like that. But I think one of the things that has been really popular for a good while with online research is sort of using DNA research and submitting your DNA to a company and utilizing the tools that are available. So I would love to hear about how DNA has helped you break through a brick wall.
I wouldn't say I've had breakthroughs, but I've had good leads. I've got one family line. It's the Jenkinsons. They came out of Ireland. That's where they were living, and then they immigrated to the United States in 1850, pretty much at the height of famine, the Irish famine. The realities are, Jenkins is not really an Irish name, and so I've done more research, and I've come to the conclusion that they were probably a family line that came out of England and immigrated to Ireland because there was this movement in England at one point in time to I guess, repopulate Ireland and make it more Protestant. The DNA testing that I've done indicates to me that, yes, the Jenkinsons came out of England, because I do have connections to a couple individuals whose ancestry, they've been able to take their family tree back far enough into the past that I'm reasonably confident that there is a connection. Now, I wouldn't have made that connection probably, or it would have been more difficult without the DNA. So I haven't broken through the so-called brick wall for that yet, and I don't know if I ever will, but it seems like it's a strong indicator that that's the relationship.
I really like that. I think that's another reminder of the importance of social history. I mean, you talked about how it made sense once you realized the whole piece about English folks being encouraged to settle in Ireland and for various reasons. So your family moving that direction made sense historically. But I also love how you talked about the ways that you connected the dots just using DNA. You know, DNA is definitely one of the tools that can be really helpful for breaking those brick walls if you're finding that you can't find anything in the paper records anywhere. So speaking of paper records, I would love to hear about some good genealogy books that you would recommend for folks to read.
Well, there's two of them, and the first one goes back to what we were just talking about with the DNA testing. That's Blaine Bettinger's book. It's called The Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy. His book, I mean, I went through two other books, and it just was a total slog trying to make sense out of the DNA testing until I got to Blaine Bettinger's book. And then things started to click. Mm-hmm. So that's one book. The other book, it's called The Great Migration, and it's by Edwin C. Guillet. It's about crossing the Atlantic between essentially 1770 and 1860 by sail, which is when the majority of my ancestors arrived here in the States. They all, between about 1830 and late 1850s. And they all came over on sailing ships. And it's a real eye-opener because, you know, the voyage across the Atlantic could be so harrowing that it could be worse than whatever they were leaving behind. I mean, most of these voyages, they took the quickest times by sail were somewhere about the high 20s, 27 days, something like that. And the longest ones were close to 2 months. And, foodstuffs, drinking water, all that stuff was going to spoil, or they would have to ration supplies by the end of the voyage because it was just taking so long. I mean, it was just I can't imagine doing that, But anyway, so it's a real eye-opening book. It was written about 90 years ago, but it's well cited, and it's a real good read.
I guess that shows us that, like, some older books, just because it's older doesn't mean it's not worth reading.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to history. Sometimes there's always new things to learn, but a lot of times there's still some good stuff in those older texts. So Thank you for sharing those. And speaking of history, I'd love to hear about what your favorite part of American history is.
Well, it would go back to my great-grandfather, Peter Schmidt, who became Peter Smith. He came over in 1856 and ended up joining the Union Army in 1863. And he not only served once, but he re-upped for a second time in the Union Army. And I've not been able ever to find his first papers as far as naturalization. But his second papers, or final papers, I should say, I've been able to find those. And what happened is that he took advantage of the fact that he served in the military to become a naturalized citizen of the United States. And I think to me, that is one of the great things about this country. I mean, if you serve for the military, that's a foot in if you want to become a citizen. So
that's a fun part of history. One of the things I really like about genealogy is we hear these things, kind of larger sort of stories and narratives about the history of the country. But when we do our own genealogy research, we begin to build upon that so that we can see how our ancestors intersected with the larger narrative or things that were happening in the country. So Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
And thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us in general, Phil. We hope that you enjoyed listening to and learning from Phil. Hopefully you are inspired by something he shared or said. Maybe he even gave you an idea to help further your research. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with those who you think would also be interested. One of the best things you can do to support us is to take a moment to comment or leave a rating for this podcast. Those comments and ratings help get this podcast noticed. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.